Welcome to Speak English with me.
Improve your vocabulary, grammar, and pronunciation with our engaging lessons.
Hello everyone, and welcome back to Speak English with me. I'm Sam.
And I'm Emma. We're so happy you're here because today we're going to uncover something that surprises almost every English learner. Two tiny words, actually and factually. They seem easy, but native speakers use them in ways that textbooks rarely explain.
Have you ever listened to a movie, a podcast, or a conversation and thought, I know that word, so why did they use it there? If that's happened to you, don't worry. By the end of today's episode, those little moments will make a lot more sense.
I love this topic because I think almost every English learner has had that moment. You learn a word from a textbook, you understand the definition, and then you watch a movie or listen to a native speaker and suddenly think, hold on, that's not how I expected them to use it.
I had that experience learning another language, so I completely understand. You begin questioning yourself. Did I learn it incorrectly? Did I miss something? It can feel surprisingly frustrating.
It really can. The funny thing is that your dictionary usually isn't wrong. It's just incomplete. A dictionary tells you what a word means. It doesn't always show you how people naturally use that word while they're chatting with friends, talking to coworkers, or telling a funny story.
That's one of the reasons we wanted to record this episode. We don't want you to memorize another grammar rule. We want you to hear these words the way native speakers genuinely use them every day.
Before we jump in, if you enjoy learning English through relaxed conversations like this instead of long grammar lessons, we'd love to have you with us every week. So don't forget to subscribe and share the podcast with another English learner. It really helps us keep making these episodes.
Now, let me ask you something. Have you ever learned a new English word and then become so excited that you started using it everywhere?
Oh, I think everyone has done that at least once.
I certainly have. Years ago, one of my students discovered the word actually. The following week, he used it in almost every sentence. I wasn't exaggerating. Every answer began with actually.
No way.
I'm serious. I'd ask, how was your weekend? He'd say, actually, it was good. Then I'd ask, did you finish your homework? He'd answer, actually, yes. I'd ask, are you hungry? He'd smile and say, actually, a little.
That's kind of adorable.
It really was. He thought he had discovered the secret to sounding like a native speaker.
And that's easy to understand because learners often notice native speakers saying actually, so they naturally think, I should use this word much more often.
The interesting part is that native speakers do use actually a lot, but not because they're following a rule. They use it because it fits the moment.
That's such an important difference. Language isn't only about choosing the correct word, it's about choosing the word that matches the situation and the feeling behind what you're saying.
Let me give everyone a quick example.
Go for it.
Imagine I say, you don't like coffee, do you?
Then I might answer, actually, I started drinking coffee a few months ago.
Does that sound natural?
Very natural. It feels friendly. You're gently correcting what you thought about me.
Now let's change only one word. Factually, I started drinking coffee a few months ago.
That suddenly sounds so serious. It feels like you're standing in a courtroom or reading from a research paper.
That's what surprises many learners. Both words have something to do with truth, but they don't create the same feeling at all.
And today, we're going to show you why. By the end of this episode, you'll know when actually sounds warm and conversational, why factually is much less common in everyday speech, and how to avoid one of the biggest mistakes English learners make with these words.
I also hope you'll start noticing these little patterns the next time you watch a movie or listen to native speakers. Once you hear them in real conversations, it's almost impossible to stop noticing them.
I still remember that happening to me with another expression. One day, I suddenly realized people were using it everywhere, and I wondered how I'd missed it for so long. That's one of the best parts of learning a language. Your ears slowly wake up, and conversations begin making sense in a completely different way.
One thing I've noticed is that many learners think actually has one simple meaning. Then they hear native speakers using it in 5 different situations, and suddenly everything becomes confusing.
That's because people usually learn the translation first instead of the feeling behind the word.
I love the way you said that. The feeling behind the word, that's what changes everything.
Let's start with the most common use. Imagine I say, I heard you're moving to London next month.
Then you smile and say, actually, I'm staying here.
That sounds completely natural because I'm gently correcting your information. There's no argument, there's no frustration. I'm simply replacing one idea with another.
And notice something important. Your voice is calm. If you sound angry, the word can feel very different.
That's such a good point. Words don't work alone. Your tone matters just as much.
Let's try another one.
Go ahead.
You must be exhausted after that 10-hour flight.
Actually, I slept most of the way.
Again, you're correcting my assumption.
Right. Native speakers do this all the time without even thinking about it.
Here's something funny. I was having dinner with a friend a few months ago, and the waiter looked at my plate and asked, "Are you still working on that?"
Let me guess, you weren't.
Not even close, so I smiled and said, "Actually, I'm finished."
That's such a normal situation. Nobody at the restaurant would think, oh, what an interesting use of actually. It simply fits the conversation.
That's one of the biggest differences between textbooks and real life. Textbooks often teach big vocabulary. Real conversations are built with small words.
And those small words quietly make everything sound much more natural.
Here's another situation that learners hear all the time.
I think I know where you're going.
I am. Imagine I say, "How was the movie?"
It was actually much better than I expected.
That's one of my favorite uses.
Mine too, because there's no correction here. Nobody asked a wrong question. I'm simply expressing that the result surprised me.
Here's another one.
The restaurant was actually quite affordable.
Or, the interview was actually fun.
Or even, the exam was actually easier than I thought.
Those sound so natural that native speakers barely notice the word.
And if you remove it,
The exam was easier than I thought.
still correct.
Very much so.
But adding actually gives listeners a tiny clue that your expectation and reality were different.
That's something learners should remember. Native speakers often use actually to tell a little story inside one sentence.
I love that description.
Think about it. Before the word comes your expectation. After the word comes reality.
That's brilliant. I thought this, actually, this happened. Even when the first part isn't spoken, people can still feel the contrast.
That's why this tiny word appears everywhere. It quietly connects expectations with reality without making the conversation sound heavy.
And once you begin hearing it that way, instead of translating it word for word, you'll notice that native speakers aren't using a magic vocabulary word. They're simply guiding the listener through what they expected and what really happened.
You know, after everything we've said so far, I think this is where many learners become curious. They start wondering, if actually is so common, then where does factually fit into everyday English?
And the honest answer surprises people. It doesn't fit into everyday English very often.
That's probably the biggest lesson of today's episode.
It really is. You can spend an entire week talking with native speakers and never hear anyone use factually in a casual conversation.
Yet learners sometimes think it's the more advanced version of actually.
I've heard that many times. Someone learns a longer word and assumes it must sound more natural or more impressive.
But longer doesn't always mean better.
Not in conversation. Native speakers usually choose the word that feels effortless.
So let's compare them side by side.
Perfect.
I tell you, I heard your meeting starts at 9.
I'd probably answer, actually, it starts at 10.
Now let's replace the word.
Factually, it starts at 10.
That suddenly feels strange.
Very strange. It sounds as if I'm trying to win an argument instead of simply correcting you.
That's an important difference. Actually helps the conversation continue. Factually often appears when accuracy itself becomes the topic.
Think about a debate.
Or a news discussion.
Or someone checking whether a statement is true.
Here's an example.
Go ahead.
Imagine two friends are talking about history. One says, that event happened in 1850.
The other replies, factually, that's incorrect. It happened much earlier.
Now the speaker isn't just giving new information.
They're evaluating whether something is true or false.
That's why the sentence sounds much more formal.
Let's try another one.
A journalist writes, "The article was emotionally powerful but factually inaccurate."
That sounds completely normal because journalists often separate feelings from facts.
Here's another.
The movie is entertaining, but it's not factually correct.
Again, that works beautifully.
Notice that nobody is chatting over coffee
They're reviewing something
or analyzing it.
or checking evidence.
That's the world where factually feels comfortable.
I remember reading comments online after a documentary was released.
Let me guess, people were arguing.
Of course they were.
That's the internet.
One person wrote, "It's visually beautiful."
Another replied, yes, but factually it's full of mistakes.
That sounded completely natural in that context.
Because the discussion was about accuracy, not everyday conversation.
Here's something learners can remember.
I'm ready.
If you're talking to friends, family, coworkers, classmates, or neighbors, there's a very good chance you'll use actually many times before you ever need factually.
That's such a practical guideline.
It doesn't mean you should forget the word factually.
Not at all, it's still useful.
You just need to recognize the situations where it belongs.
Think of it as a specialist.
I like that.
It has an important job, but it doesn't appear at every conversation.
Meanwhile, actually is like that friendly neighbor you see almost every day.
That's a great comparison because learners remember pictures better than rules.
Let's finish with one last comparison.
Go ahead.
Actually, I don't think that's true.
Friendly, natural, something you might hear every day.
Now, factually, that's incorrect.
That sounds firmer, more serious. It isn't rude by itself, but it raises the level of the conversation immediately.
And that's why choosing between these two words isn't really about vocabulary.
It's about understanding the atmosphere you're creating. One word quietly keeps the conversation warm. The other invites everyone to focus on evidence and accuracy. Once you recognize that difference, you'll stop wondering which word sounds more advanced and start choosing the one that truly fits the moment.
There's another mistake I hear quite often, and I completely understand why it happens. Learners start using actually whenever they want to sound more fluent, even when the conversation doesn't need it.
I've noticed that too. Sometimes the sentence is perfectly natural without it.
Let me give you an example. Imagine I ask, "What did you have for lunch?"
I could simply answer, I had pasta.
That's all you need.
But some learners say, actually, I had pasta.
And then I find myself wondering, what were you correcting?
That's the key question. If nobody made an assumption, or if nothing surprising happened, actually may not have a purpose.
Think of it as a tool. You don't use a hammer when you need a paintbrush.
Nice comparison. Every word should have a job.
Let's try a few situations.
Sounds good.
I ask, "Where do you live?"
I live in Manchester.
Perfect.
Now suppose you say, I thought you still lived in Leeds.
Then?
Then, actually, I moved to Manchester last year.
Now it feels completely natural.
Because I'm responding to something you believed.
Here's another one. I ask, "Do you want some tea?"
No thanks, I'm fine.
Simple.
But if you remembered that I loved tea and you said, you always drink tea, then I might reply, actually, I've switched to coffee recently.
The conversation has a reason for the word.
That's what listeners should look for. Ask yourself, why am I saying actually?
If you have a clear answer, you're probably using it well.
Another thing worth mentioning is that actually can sometimes sound unfriendly if your tone is too sharp.
That's such an important point.
Imagine someone says, this restaurant is on the left.
And you answer,
Actually, it's on the right.
those same words can sound kind and helpful.
Or they can sound like you're saying, you're wrong.
The difference is your voice, your facial expression, and the relationship between the speakers.
Native speakers think about that without realizing it. They're not choosing grammar, they're choosing how they want the other person to feel.
I remember making this mistake myself while learning another language.
Really? What happened?
I learned the direct translation of actually and used it every time I corrected someone. I thought I sounded polite.
But
My friend laughed and said, "You sound like you're correcting me every 5 minutes."
that's funny.
It was embarrassing at the time, but it taught me something valuable. Fluency isn't collecting more words, it's understanding the effect those words have on people.
I couldn't agree more. Sometimes removing one unnecessary word makes you sound more natural than adding 3 impressive ones.
Before we finish today's discussion, let's give everyone a few alternatives because native speakers don't rely on actually all the time.
Great idea.
Sometimes we simply say, well.
Or, to be honest,
As it turns out,
the funny thing is,
believe it or not,
each one creates a slightly different feeling.
that's why listening practice matters so much. You start hearing these little choices, and gradually they become part of your own English.
And don't put pressure on yourself to master all of them immediately. Pick one pattern, notice it during the week, and try using it naturally in a conversation. Then move on to the next one. That's how real progress happens, little by little, conversation by conversation, until one day you suddenly realize you're speaking with much more confidence than you ever imagined.
You know what I hope happens after today's episode?
What's that?
I hope our listeners start noticing these words instead of worrying about them.
That's such a good goal because once you notice something in real conversations, your brain starts collecting examples without much effort.
And that's when learning becomes exciting. You watch a movie, someone says actually, and instead of translating it, you think, oh, I know why they chose that word.
Then a few days later, you hear another example in a completely different situation, and suddenly the pattern becomes much clearer.
I think that's how most language learning works. It isn't one big moment where everything finally makes sense. It's hundreds of little moments that slowly connect together.
I still remember learning expressions that confused me for months. Then one day I heard them several times in the same week, and it felt like someone had switched on a light.
Before we finish, let's imagine one last conversation.
I like this idea.
I see you carrying a suitcase and I say, going on vacation?
I'd smile and say, actually, I'm moving.
Then I'd probably look surprised and ask, really? I had no idea.
It happened pretty quickly. I wasn't planning it a few months ago, but a great opportunity appeared.
Then I might say, I thought you'd stay here for another year.
I thought so too, but life had different plans.
See how natural that feels? Nobody's thinking about grammar.
They're simply sharing information, correcting assumptions, and reacting to each other.
Now imagine I answered, factually, you're moving.
I'd probably laugh because that's not the kind of situation where native speakers normally use that word.
Unless we suddenly became lawyers discussing evidence.
Or journalists checking whether a report is accurate.
So here's the idea I'd love everyone to remember. Don't ask yourself which word sounds smarter.
Ask yourself which word fits this conversation.
Most of the time, everyday conversations need warmth, not formality.
And that's one reason native speakers use actually so comfortably. It helps conversations flow without making them sound stiff.
Before we say goodbye, let's have a quick word tour.
Our first expression is assumption. An assumption is something you believe is true before you know all the facts. For example, I assumed you were busy.
Next is natural. When English sounds natural, it feels like something native speakers would genuinely say in that situation.
Then we have context. Context means the situation around the words. The same sentence can feel different depending on the context.
Another useful word is formal. Formal language is more common in professional writing, presentations, reports, or serious discussions than in everyday chats with friends.
And finally, tone. Tone is the feeling your voice creates. Sometimes your tone changes the meaning more than the words themselves.
We really hope today's conversation helps you hear English a little differently. Listen for these words during the week, notice when native speakers use them, and don't rush to use them in every sentence. Give yourself time to build that instinct naturally.
Thanks for spending part of your day with us. Keep listening, keep speaking, and most importantly, keep enjoying the process. Every conversation teaches you something new, even if you don't realize it straight away.
We'll be back soon with another real English conversation, and until then, take care and have a wonderful week.